Throughout their lightning expansion throughout Eurasia, the Mongols adopted many religions from their many conquered peoples. However, they always retained their roots in their original faith, an animist belief system led by a caste of shamans. One of the most mysterious parts of the Mongol Empire in the minds of many is the role that these shamans played in its expansion. Popular portrayal often relies on stereotypes of the shamanic role, but there's so much more information on them which survives. In this video, we'll look at what historical sources say about shamans in the Mongol Empire and explore the role they played both in shaping Mongol society and in facilitating Mongol conquests. This week, our YouTube members and patrons will continue watching our series on the Second Punic War, with the video on the Battle of Lake Trasimene, the engagement that made Rome panic and bring Fabius Maximus to power. The support of YouTube members and patrons allows us to continue releasing these free videos without worrying about the unstable YouTube ad revenue and lets us be more choosy in terms of our sponsors. You can join their ranks via the links in the description and get access to 2 weekly exclusive videos with more than 150 right now, including the series on the Pacific War, Fall of Sparta, First and Second Punic Wars, Russian revolutions and the Civil War, Italian reunification wars, Albigensian Crusade, History of Prussia, Biography of Sulla, the Reconquista, the World War II North African Campaign, the Persian Wars, and much more. Thanks for your kind support. While the word shaman is likely of Tunguistic origin in the 13th century, the Mongols referred to male shamans as buge and female shamans as idugan. These were used in conjunction with the Turkic word kam. Shamans could be male or female, though even today the role is more commonly held by men. We don't have exact descriptions of the dress of medieval shamans beyond a few statements of lead shamans garbed in white and riding white horses. But we do know how Mongol shamans from more recent centuries dressed, so we can assume there is continuity with their medieval forebears. Shamanic dress likely included key features such as the wearing of mirrors along with other small metal ornaments and bells, elaborate hats which often covered the face and eyes, especially during rituals, and long colourful bands tied to them, emulating snakes or bird wings. The drum and drumstick were essential equipment used for rhythmic beats to accommodate trances and chants. Other tools of the office included staves, and in some cases, using a bundle of thistles as a small whip is a trait associated with them. Shamans fulfilled several roles in traditional Mongol society, but before we explore these, we have to contextualize a bit of the Mongolian religion of the 13th century. While traditional religion is often called shamanism, this is not accurate. Shamans were not the only or even primary religious clergy. The heads of lineages and the khans and their wives arguably held more critical public roles and led in ceremonies throughout the year. Shamans were instead specialists, consulted on particular matters. For most nomadic people of Eurasian steppes, the chief deity was Tengri, generally translated to heaven, interpreted on a spectrum as the literal sky to an anthropomorphized god. For the Mongols, Tengri was paired with Natige, usually translated to Earth Mother, a divine being who acted as a consort and terrestrial balance to Tengri and his sky domain. Below them were a set of lesser deities, 99 Tengri and 77 Natige. A tier further below these lesser deities were the spirits that inhabited the world, both the animals and natural geography. Each human also consisted of multiple, usually 3 spirits. On death, people did not go to heaven or hell, but rather to a shadowy netherworld that mirrored the terrestrial world. In this netherworld, your status in life made your status in death. A slave remained a slave, while a Khan remained a Khan. But not all spirits in a person might go to this next world, and could become tethered to the terrestrial one. Hence prohibitions against spilling blood on the ground, as it could result in a spirit becoming stuck in that location and turning malevolent. The spirit of someone of noble blood was a very powerful one, and not one you wanted to anger. This belief resulted in the infamous and imaginative Mongol practice of disposing of the nobles of their foes in a bloodless manner, such as rolling them up in carpets and stomping them to death. This was done not so much out of a sense of respect or honor, but as an attempt at avoiding misfortune. It was the duty of shamans to identify these spirits and their intentions. If the spirit meant to cause ill, then the shamans, through trances or dreams, had their souls travel to engage with these spirits. Not all spirits were cruel though. Ancestral spirits, or a shaman spirit when they died, could be held in an ongon, which was usually a small figure made of felt, silk, bronze, or other materials ritually fed during meals. These ongon were supposed to look out for their family and descendants. Alternatively, the ongon could be used to house some of the spirits the shamans faced. Certain aspects of these beliefs are still practiced in Mongolia and other regions today. The shaman was, therefore, someone the average Mongol soldier or herdsman would only encounter under exceptional circumstances, while Khans and nobility made greater use of them. The most common interaction that ordinary people had with shamans seems to have been when they were sick. In these situations, the shaman acted as a type of physician and came in to diagnose and determine if a sickness was caused by malevolent spirits, and then what the appropriate response was, such as a sort of exorcism where the shaman entered a trance to draw the spirit away. We see references to the shamans having bowls of mixtures they gave for physical sores or for the individual to drink. William of Rubruck, an eyewitness of their activities in the Mongol imperial capital of Karakorum in the 1250s, describes one method for determining a person's illness. When one of Great Khan Mungke's concubines fell ill, the shamans forced, through uncertain means, her German slave to sleep for several days. When the slave awoke, she was asked if she had seen the concubine's soul amongst those soon to be deceased. The slave said no, and the shamans declared that the concubine would recover from her illness. Rubruck left Karakorum before he could see if this was true, but the German girl still suffered ferocious headaches by the time he left. We also see shamans employed in the interpretation and prediction of natural phenomena, such as comets or eclipses. Astrology was a skill the Mongols rated highly, and they richly rewarded anyone who showed ability in this area. They were especially curious about what these events foretold for the future, or if they were ill news. Numerous sources attest to how the Khans consulted with shamans before important events, especially campaigns. According to these accounts, the Mongols did not launch a campaign without first being told by the shamans that their readings indicated it would be successful. William of Rubruck noted after his journey to Karakorum that the reason the Mongols had not returned to Hungary after 1242 was because the shamans had forbidden it on account of bad omens. While on the borders of India in the 1220s, Persian and Chinese accounts have Chinggis Khan withdraw due to omens identified by his shamans and advisors. One account indicates the sighting of a rhinoceros, an animal unknown to the Mongols. One of the most common means of divination was scapulomancy, the burning of sheep shoulder blades. By interpreting the directions in which cracks formed on the shoulder blades, the shamans judged if an action was suitable. We have numerous written accounts of the Mongols engaging in this practice, and even archaeological evidence for it. At Avaga in Mongolia, a site often called the first capital of the Mongol Empire, pits of thousands of burned shoulder blades have been excavated. Whether the shamans indeed controlled the final decision on the Chinggisid military campaigns is less clear. Sources sometimes refer to shamans being forced to give multiple readings until the Khan received the desired outcome. The shamans' readings in this case may not have been just for the Khan, but in order to spread the message to the soldiers that good fortune had been seen, and thus give the soldiers greater confidence that victory was already assured. And for occasions where the Khans saw a military operation as untenable, then a shaman interpreting a dark fortune for the operation could serve as a convenient face-saving measure, ascribing it to heaven's will. Some shamans also had political power. Some rulers in 12th and early 13th century Mongolia had dual roles as chiefs and shamans, and were identified by the title Beki. Some examples of men who wore this title were Kaduka Beki of the Oirat and Toktoga Beki of the Merkit. While Kaduka Beki eventually became a marriage ally of Chinggis Khan's family, before that he allied with Chinggis's enemies, and in one battle he attempted to use a magic stone to control the weather. Control over the elements is another power associated with shamans. Mongol and Turkic shamans had a unique stone called Jada or Yad, which, through incantation, was alleged to be able to change the weather. In a battle in 1202 against Chinggis Khan, Kaduka Beki used his Jada to bring a rainstorm against Chinggis's army, only for the storm to instead blow into the face of Kaduka and his allies and scatter them. In February 1232, a Kengler man in Mongol service used a weatherstone to cause a huge snowstorm that paralyzed the rival army of the Jin dynasty. Numerous other mentions of such stones appear before and after the Mongol Empire, with varying degrees of success. At other times, the sources report stories of how a particular shaman was impervious to cold weather, or identify individuals in the Khan's court who, through evil actions, had brought on excessive cold in winter. Killing the individual was supposed to bring warmer weather. It's probably no coincidence the famous Baba Turkles story explaining the conversion to Islam of Khan Uzbey of the Golden Horde features a competition where a shaman and Baba Turkles entered an oven to see who would survive and prove their faith correct. The shaman burned alive, while Baba Turkles survived the ordeal comfortably, thus, according to this apocryphal tale, bringing Uzbey into the embrace of Islam. We can explore a bit of the relationship between the Khans and Shamans by looking at the reign of Mongol, Chinggis Khan's grandson and the last ruler of the united Mongol Empire. For Mongol, we have a number of sources from differing perspectives commenting on shamans in his reign and his interactions with them. These sources are in Chinese, European, Persian, and even included the secret history of the Mongols, which was likely written on Mongol's order in 1252. In these sources, we see that while the Khans often relied heavily on their shamans, they were often frustrated by them as well. Yuan dynasty accounts record Mongol's great trust in his shamans, deliberating with them daily. William of Rubruck corroborates this in his eyewitness account, in which he claims he personally saw Mongol constantly ordering the burning of shoulder blades before any decision, such as whether or not an envoy should enter his ger. Rubruck noted how Mongol had appointed a chief shaman whose residence was only a stone's throw from Mongol's own. Among his tasks, we are told, was overseeing the wagon carrying the imperial ongon, or idols for holding spirits. Yet at the same time, a particular frustration towards shamans, even by Mongol, is apparent. Complaints about shamans were not new. A common one leveled against them was their failure to heal the sick. The Ilkhanid historian and vizier Rashid al-Din records an antagonism that was traced back to a shaman failing to heal the brother-in-law of Chinggis Khan's great-grandfather. The man died, and his family hunted down and killed the shaman, setting off a decades-long feud that led to the murder of Chinggis Khan's father, and finally the extermination of the rival group in 1202. Failed divinations also caused issues. During his stay in Mongol's Ordu, Rubruck saw how Mongol's empress gave birth to a baby boy, for whom the shamans foretold an excellent future. When the boy died only a few days later, the empress became furious at the shamans. Corruption was also a common charge. Tributes and envoys arriving for the Khan passed between two fires as a means of purification, and the shamans took a share of the tribute for themselves as payment. In an episode also observed by Rubruck, one of the ladies of the Ordu of another of Mongol's wives complained of this, and the shamans conspired against her. When this wife fell ill and died, the shamans said the same lady who had denounced them had bewitched her. The shamans took her captive and tortured her for a week. In the end, Mongol Khan himself intervened and ordered the lady to be freed. Another of the shamans' duties was the identification of witches, one of the most serious offences to the Mongols. Conveniently, witches often happened to be someone the shaman or the Khan saw as a political enemy. Over the 1240s and 50s, witchcraft accusations resulted in the deaths of many high-ranking figures, mostly women. During the reign of Guyuk Khan from 1246 to 48, we see the first of these accusations, a woman named Fatima, an influential favourite of Guyuk's mother, Turageni Khatun. After the death of Ugadai Khan in 1241, until Guyuk's enthronement in 1246, Turageni was the regent ruling the Mongol Empire, and Fatima was her close companion. After Guyuk became Great Khan, he sought to break his mother's power networks. Fatima was accused of cursing Guyuk's brother and causing him to fall deathly ill, and for this, Fatima and everyone connected to her were killed in a particularly cruel manner. More people followed, and in turn the accusers became accused of witchcraft by their own rivals, which continued into Mongol's reign. The most serious complaint leveled against shamans was when they tried to hold on to power. The most infamous example of this came early in the Mongol Empire. Chinggis Khan himself faced a rival in the form of his stepbrother, the powerful shaman Teb Tengeri. Allegedly, Teb Tengeri was the first to convince Chinggis of his divine future greatness, and even bestowed upon him the title of Chinggis Khan during the Great Kurultai in 1206 that established the Mongol Empire. After that, Teb Tengeri slowly built his influence, stealing away followers from other princes, and even physically beating the Khan's brothers before convincing Chinggis that his own brother, Kasar, was plotting against him. Chinggis was personally interrogating his brother when his elderly mother had to intervene and put a stop to the matter. Still, accusations remained that Teb Tengeri had his eye on supreme power himself. After being persuaded by his wife, Burte, Chinggis was finally convinced to let his brothers break both Teb Tengeri's power and his back. Even decades after Teb Tengeri's death, he remained a legendary mystical figure to the Mongols. The Persian official and historian Javaini travelled to Mongolia in the early 1250s and reported how he had interviewed Mongols who still spoke of Teb Tengeri in awe, believing that Teb had travelled on a grey horse to speak with heaven. In a letter to King Louis IX of France, sent in 1262 by Mongol's younger brother Hulagu, the name of Teb Tengeri and the prophecy he passed on from heaven was still invoked. These trends come together in The Secret History of the Mongols, a chronicle for the Mongolian royal family, likely compiled on Mongol's order in 1252. A reader of The Secret History may be surprised at how rarely shamans appear. When they do appear, the narrative treats them harshly. Teb Tengeri's tale briefly appears, yet his powers and role in Chinggis Khan's rise to power are significantly reduced, emphasizing instead his scheming. Other times they appear in The Secret History, they cause disaster and are portrayed as greedy or responsible for the death of Mongol's father, Tolui. In the Secret History narrative, the only proper covenants with heaven are not the shamans, but the Chinggisid family, particularly the Khans. At critical moments in the narrative, it is Chinggis Khan who speaks directly to Tengri when he needs to, and this practice continued among his heirs, where figures like Ugadei, Batu and more climb a high vantage point, remove their hats and belts, and go on their knees before heaven as a sign of submission. This is probably the key to understanding Mongol Khan's views towards shamans, and this juxtaposition between some sources demonstrates his constant consultation with them and a level of mistrust towards them. For Mongol, most of his reign was dedicated to fixing what he saw as the mistakes of the 1240s under Turageni and Guyuk. Witchcraft and shamans who had too much power in comparison to the Khan were something he hated. Shamans to Mongol were intermediaries for spirits, ailments, celestial occurrences such as eclipses, and other tasks necessary to the running of the empire. Day-to-day decisions could be run by the shaman to judge their outcome. But the shaman's influence could not compete with the Khan's, and they were not to stand between the Khan and Almighty Tengri. More videos on Mongol history and society are on the way. To ensure you don't miss that, make sure you are subscribed and have pressed the bell button. Please consider liking, subscribing, commenting and sharing, it helps immensely. Recently we've started releasing weekly Patreon and YouTube member exclusive content. Consider joining their ranks via the link in the description or button under the video to watch these weekly videos, learn about our schedule, get early access to our videos, access our private Discord, and much more. This is the Kings and Generals channel, and we will catch you on the next one.